there's one little, this is a poet scholar from Santa Cruz that really is important to me. I'm going to quote it. It's Norman L. Brown from Love's Body. And you could ponder this forever, but I'll toss it out there. He's actually quoting from Jack Kerouac, too. Admit the void, accept loss forever. Wisdom is mourning. Blessed are they that mourn. Now, one thing that Masao did over and over to me, I called it the kill the Buddha deconstruction. He would kill the Buddha of any formulation I had, any piety I had, years and years. I mean, the anecdote I referred to in that, the longer version of the talk, and I had several. One of first meeting Masao in 1973, and him making some crazed comment about the dissertation I was working on, and then another. Oh, I know the first one. He was at NYU, and he was supposed to work with Leon Adele, and then Leon Adele said, this is the ring of Henry James, and Masao said something like, "Do you want me to kiss it or something?" It's like refusing a certain kind of professional piety. But we were at Oi's house in Tokyo at the International Comparative Literature Conference, and we had gone there to make a kind of intervention. It was very planned. And Masao had great cultural capital in Japan because he had taught the emperor in a high school, and also he was from the last the Tokyo Imperial University. So even though the right wing hated him, they venerated him. They couldn't kind of do anything against him. But anyway, we're in Oi's house. This is before he won the Nobel Prize. And Masao's going, "What are you doing? Working on Bamboo Ridge, the local. Bamboo Ridge is bullshit, Rob. It means absolutely nothing." He's like screaming at me. And I just said, reeled. And then basically said, well, I'm going to work to prove, it took me, I don't know, 5 years or something to try to thicken the category of the local and the indigenous in terms of the relation to the global. So, but I'm gonna read some of this stuff. This is different commentaries that people said about Masao. Give you some sense of the impact and range. This is from Laura Lyons, who's a professor of English in Hawaii. "Such brilliance leaves many trails of light for others to follow." Gayatri Spivak, who you all know, she's in New York City. "Hard to believe that man of passionate commitment and energy is gone." David Palumbo Liu in Stanford. "So sorry to hear of Masao's passing. He was such a strong and fiery presence across the fields." Now, David, in a way, has what I've seen, I consider the best critique of Masao. It's coming out in a journal called Criticism. And he basically tries to come to terms with Masao's slandering, scapegoating of multiculturalism and identity politics. And David actually sort of got into Asian American studies with Masao in the trenches, in warfare when ethnic studies was being kind of coalesced with third world studies at Berkeley in 1969 and 70, et cetera. But David basically says that Masao kind of was missing the boat on some of that stuff, and then he tries to fill in some of the politics of it. But Jim Murad in San Diego, "Masao's intellect was aglow with ferocity and humor. Few are irreplaceable. Masao is one." Jin Jern, who's a film scholar in Korea, "He was a wonderful mentor, and I will be eternally grateful for everything he taught me. If I never met Masao, I would have not have gone to grad school." He was kind of a business and linguistic major here or something, so he changed his life. Andy Wang in Taipei, who's at Academia Sinica and the key person for Asian American Studies in Taiwan. "I am not sure Professor Miyoshi would be happy to know we have rallied, I'm sure he would be happy to know we have rallied a transnational community in memory of him and his gift to us all." And he's speaking about occupying space on Facebook to create a sort of an alternative channel of communication. It's a kind of a territory of linkage and antagonism in some ways. Now, this is Ray Chow, of course, probably more capacious, and she worked on the series with Masao at Duke, so she knew him pretty well. "It is hard to believe that Masao has passed away. And at a time like this, words seem so hollow, but I will miss him. Not only his fearlessness," that's the word that keeps coming back to me too, over and over, fearlessness, "generosity, integrity, but also his wicked sense of humor, his inimitable gift for picking out a comical aspect of even the gravest matter in such a way as to make me realize my own lack of perspective. I will miss Masao terribly as a beloved colleague and friend. He will remain a source of inspiration and courage for many of us. And then, well, this is like another generation. So Masao has impacted some of our students, and they have impacted a next generation of students, and they kind of feel that. This is Amy Fujiwara Shen. She's getting her doctorate at Berkeley now. Masao Miyoshi was an integral professor during my senior year at UCSD. His class was the first I took that combined Asian American and Asian studies and inspired me to continue both interests to the graduate level. And this is Leo Ching out there in the audience from Durham. I regret not having the opportunity to hear him talk, laugh, criticize. He was so absolutely right about the ivory tower in ruins and about so many other things. Now that's the negative thing. The positive thing is that Masao, the whole idea of trespassing into private property and occupying spaces, that's what's taking place. You know, like oppose Wall Street in the various spaces you're in, from the academia to outside academia, and that's, I think Masao would take great hope in that too. So I have other stuff. Lindsay Waters basically thinks Masao helped them to become a subject, that Masao taught Lindsay to feel, if you can believe that. He says Jimi Hendrix and Masao. True. Okay, forgive me, Lindsay. He's in Nanjing, so he can't. Chris Connery basically says for Asian studies, Masao was Said, because everybody was doing philology and containment, and all of a sudden Masao was putting together the totality and encouraged people like Chris to say, wow, you know, you can kind of link to these movements. You can write about, you know, Mao, global Mao, in a more of a comparative world perspective that's not just, you know, doing, you know, kind of Cold War tinkering or something. But and Amy Perry, Amy's not here, but Amy was, is Amy out there? She's somewhere in San Diego now, but she's a really important scholar in Taiwan doing minority and transnational studies, and she was one of Masao's, I think, best students in the class with Leo and Eric. Masao Miyoshi marked up my papers with lots of red ink, asked me what the hell I thought I was saying in every sentence that wasn't written clearly enough, and then, if I was able to explain the sentence, this is on her dissertation, asked me if I really thought that was important. And so long as he did that, I knew he was engaging and that I would learn a lot. He taught me how to argue, but that was not the most important thing I learned from him. What he taught me was to always consider the larger social effects for the knowledge I was producing, that the point was not to be right, but to try to be just. Now that's a very profound. And then Eric Kasdan, who's out in the audience, along with the name trespasses, we might also call Miyoshi the enlivener. So you got negation, but that's not enough, because Masao is always building up. That's the Pauline word for building up a world, building up a self, building up a community. And he might not like the adjective Pauline, but I'll use it. Along with the name trespassers, we might also call Masao the enlivener, not just breathing new, this is chi metaphor, not just breathing new life into various fields he breaks into, but enlivening the various people he meets along the way. A great life force builder, right? There is something about his critical style, from crisp sentences to his extemporaneous wit, which makes it simply impossible to be disheartened or uninspired around him. Miyoshi enlivened. So that's where I say it's almost like the Kill the Buddha deconstruction. You shred up and deconstruct the stuff that's interfering with life, and then you link to the forces that are building you up and enlivening you. So, yeah, and then I have a lot of stuff about what he did from each book. I kind of go through book by book, but I'm not going to get carried away with do that. But I'm gonna read you the last yeah, I guess it's the last email he sent to me, and it's like a Basho haiku, if I get it right. Mari and I were in Los Angeles, and we drove down to Del Mar 5 o'clock in the morning when we found out, and we tried to meet him, but it was a complicated scene because his family was there, and they had the lawyers there, and they were kind of dividing up the stakes. So all we could do was leave this big set of flowers at the door and go. So, but anyway, he then, out of the blue, October 3rd, 2009, sends me this email. He goes from Masao Miyoshi, subject, some beatitudes and thanks to Rob, UCSC. Still, your flowers were gorgeous till a few days ago. Thanks again, Masao. And so it was like that image of beauty, fragile beauty. And, you know, even Masao, who probably look more like that gorilla than the flowers. You know, when you realize somehow he's going to be taken out of your life, it makes you appreciate everything, you know, a lot more. So, okay, thanks.